Hello, I'm Charles Day, and for many years I looked after the beehives at Wave Hill. And the bees produce us honey, which we find in jars. But how do we get the honey into the jar from the beehive? This is a section of hive that came off yesterday from the bees, and this is a frame of capped honey. By capped, we mean it's covered in fine wax, which keeps the honey inside the honeycomb. So our first job is to remove the caps using this serrated knife that's especially made for the job. It's called an uncapping knife. You're keeping up with me? Yeah.
Slicing very carefully just to remove the caps and not going too deeply into the honeycomb itself. You can see it's like parchment. It also sticks. Doesn't usually stick as much as this, but of course. There. We can't get to all the caps with the knife necessarily, so we use this uncapping tool, comb, for those bits we can't reach with the knife. And then we approach the other side, do the same way. Here I think we might have a problem. It's this side the bees didn't build out the comb quite so far, so I can't reach it with the knife as easily. So I think I'll have to use the uncapping comb. So there's one frame of uncapped comb, which we put into our extractor. So now we have 4 uncapped frames full of honey in the extractor. I'm going to put the lid on. Start spinning, because it works as a very simple centrifuge. It's like a salad spinner, if you like. By turning this handle, we're spinning the basket inside. And that noise is not entirely my elbow, some of it's the machine. So turn gently to begin with, just to let the loose honey drop out. Now I'll put a bit more pressure on. So honey is simply being thrown out of the comb against the insides of the extractor, running down, coming out of the spigot, dropping from the spigot through this, which is a fine mesh which filters out odd bits of wax and other bits and pieces that you don't want in your honey. But down below in the bucket you have pure filtered honey, and that is exactly the honey that ends up in the jar. This is raw, untreated honey, just as it comes from the hive. So having spun around for quite some time, we've got a lot of the honey out from just just one side of the comb. The other side is still fairly full, so we have to turn each frame around. This is the stickiest part of the process. There's no avoiding it. If you don't like stickiness, don't do this job. One more. Sticky hands. Bowl of warm water. Toweling. Slightly less sticky hands. Lid. And we spin again. So here's our empty frame. Very empty actually, very light compared to how it was when it was full of honey. And what we do now is place it back in the section of hive. In fact, we put them all in there. Because having taken the honey away from the bees, we're now going to expect them to clean these up for us, which they will, very obligingly. They'll tidy everything up, they'll take out all the debris, rebuild the comb, and if there's still nectar around, they'll keep collecting and make more honey for us. They enjoy doing it. This is a slightly darker frame. This could be that it's simply a frame that had been in the hive from another year, or it could be later honey, which often is darker than the early season honey. Very common pattern that nectar collected in the spring seems to be lighter than or the honey made from the nectar in the spring is much lighter than the honey made from nectar collected in the late summer. Once this box, this super as we call it, is full of the empty frames, we'll simply put this back on top of the hive and let the bees do their work. So how much honey do you get from a hive? That's a good question. We have these 4 supers. They have just come off our 2 beehives, and each super can contain 40-50 pounds of honey. So we're looking at 80-90 pounds of honey for one hive. On top of that, we always leave plenty of honey for the bees. We only take the surplus. The bees will keep making honey all the time there's nectar flowing and the weather's good, and we'll only take a portion of the honey, so there's probably easily another 60-70 pounds in there, and they'll make more yet because it's late August and they still have a couple of months of honey making. So we've extracted our honey, we've got our empty frames back in the super boxes, and all we need to do now is cover the supers again, take them back to the hives and put them back on. So here we are back at the hives. We've brought the supers out from the extraction room, and these are the hives. I'm going to open up, take the top off, place these supers on top, close up, put the lid back, and leave the bees alone. So this is the hive reassembled. These are empty supers. The bees, many of which are hanging outside for the evening. They're probably just talking about their day and how it's busy it's been. but they'll get to work and clean up everything inside here, and if we're lucky they might even fill one or two of these supers with more honey this autumn, which might take off. So there's plenty of honey still left in here for them for the winter.